I know most people in this room, I think. The title of my talk is Musical Diplomacy in America's Shadow, because I wanted something that felt very like pithy and headlining, but I'm immediately going to give you the non-pithy, headliney, clickbait version of what I'm talking about. The gist of what's going on is the United States government paid my band to go to the Balkans to perform music and meet people and teach during the first 3 weeks of the Trump administration. And if that's all new information, if you don't know me, if you aren't hip to this, that's a lot to take in. Okay, there's a lot going on here. Questions like, why might be arriving in your minds. Why the government? Why are we sending anyone? Why did we send you? Why did we go to the Balkans? Why on earth did it have to happen at that particular moment in time? So we're going to go through all of that together. We got 3 parts. First part is musical diplomacy. Second part, the Balkans. And then lastly, you, meaning me. So first part, say it with me. Musical diplomacy. Thank you. So musical diplomacy falls under this really broad category within even broader category of diplomacy that is cultural diplomacy. Cultural diplomacy means countries, and really I mean like the big, fancy, wealthy countries that try to control everything, using their culture, be it dance or music or theater or food, to get other countries to like them more, to ally with them, to better trade with them, easier visas, all the million things that countries do relating to one another. In the United States, that's all done through the State Department, which you can kind of think of as the Department of Places that are not the United States. It's the everywhere else in the world department. And as it goes with bureaucracies, the State Department has a lot of stuff underneath it. Within that, there's the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs. Within that, there's an even smaller organization called American Voices. And then even smaller than that, there's a tiny little program called American Music Abroad. American Music Abroad does essentially all of the musical diplomacy work that the United States does. If the United States is sending musicians somewhere, it's involved with this in some way. How they describe themselves in very foofy government language is, the American Music Abroad program is designed to communicate America's rich musical contribution to the global music scene as it fosters cross-cultural communication and people-to-people connection to global audiences. What that means, the way that most human beings talk, is that American Music Abroad takes bands from America and sends them out into the rest of the world to do this kind of cultural diplomacy work. And importantly, the way that this is different from, well, a couple ways this is different from an American band just going on tour, going on like a world tour somewhere, largely is location. So when an American band goes on a world tour, if you look at the poster, they're going to Canada and Western Europe and maybe Australia and New Zealand and maybe Japan or South Korea. That leaves out an enormous swath of the world, and that's the whole mission of American Music Abroad as it exists today, is to go to Eastern Europe and Central Asia and South Asia and Africa and increasingly Latin America too. Additionally, cultural diplomacy means, or musical diplomacy means, you're not just playing a show, but you're also, maybe you're teaching, maybe you're going to a community center, maybe you're working with local musicians, all of that kind of stuff. But as it stands, that's what this organization is all about right now, but it's existed for a really long time. And if you've got your like history hat on, there might be something kind of looming in the back of your mind, which is the Cold War, where all the US diplomacy stuff kind of comes from, at least nowadays. Because during the Cold War, to drastically oversimplify almost everything about the Cold War, the United States and the Soviet Union, one of the fronts on which they were fighting was kind of a propaganda war for the hearts and minds of people living in the Third World, which at that point in time meant countries that weren't allied with the United States, weren't allied with USSR, were kind of off to the side, trying to stay out of the way, or just weren't convinced by either country's argument. And the USSR at that time, this being the late 1950s, had a pretty strong argument they were using to criticize the United States, which was talking about segregation and racial inequality in the United States, rightfully trying to call us out and being quite convincing to countries in the third world to lean their way versus towards the United States and towards capitalism. And so the United States really desperately needed some kind of counter-argument for this. They needed some kind of counter-propaganda. And rather than desegregating or changing any of their laws, which didn't happen until later, one of the things they did was start a program called the Jazz Ambassadors. This is a program that took most famously Louis Armstrong, but also Dizzy Gillespie and Dave Brubeck and many others, and sent them out to parts of the world that were the third world. Again, Eastern Europe, Central Asia, South Asia, Africa, and Latin America. And what was so great about jazz as a vehicle for that particular moment was, again, this being the late 1950s, jazz is a really big deal all over the world. People are very into it. It's kind of the pop music du jour all over the world. It's also a genre of music that's distinctly American. It's from here, unlike classical music, which kind of got a lot of prestige previously in diplomacy. But maybe most usefully, jazz is a genre where you can have black musicians and white musicians on the same stage playing together in a way that looks very equitable and harmonious, which is exactly the narrative that the United States government was trying to present to the world in that particular moment. So these tours went all over the place. They were very successful. After a number of years of doing this, Louis Armstrong left with quite a bit of animosity over the inherent hypocrisy happening in that program, as you might imagine, being asked to get shipped halfway across the world to present an idea of America that was not what he found when he came back home. And if your gears are really turning about that, don't worry. More conflicted feelings about representing America still to come. But the current kind of generation, the current model of how musical diplomacy works really got its start with the Jazz Ambassadors, but has changed a lot in the intervening decades. Over time, now there's become less jazz, though there still is some. There's less Cold War, but there still is some. It's expanded to more genres and more countries, and gradually, Jazz Ambassadors became American Music Abroad, which is, again, the organization that does all of that we're doing now. It's also the organization that sent me and the rest of the band that I play with to the Balkans. That brings us to part 2. Say it with me. The Balkans! Thank you. So when you try to get a clear definition of the Balkans, you get like 18 different answers, none of which agree with each other. So for the purposes of this lecture, I'm just talking about the countries that we went to. So we went to 5 countries on the tour that we did, which is the most countries they've ever done on an American Music Abroad tour. I'm not sure why they did it this way, but they sure did. Those countries were Kosovo, North Macedonia, Bulgaria, Slovenia, and Bosnia and Herzegovina. When you talk to these countries about how should we understand you, how do we put you in historical context, what's the deal with the Balkans, one of the first things they'll say is that the Balkans as a region has been kicked around by any empire with power nearby for the last 2,000 years. So the Romans, the Bulgarians, the Byzantine Empire, the Habsburgs, the Ottomans, the Kingdom of Yugoslavia just itself as a country, all of those forces over the last 2 millennia have conglomerated this region and then chopped it up again and reconglomerated it somewhere else and then chopped it up again. And that's given us the term Balkanization, meaning to take some political entity, usually a country, and fracture it into a bunch of different subsidiary countries in some way. So as you might imagine, this region is incredibly diverse, ethnically and culturally and religiously and linguistically. And as often happens when that is true, when different cultures are intersecting with each other over large periods of time, the history of this place is incredibly bloody. Every one of these countries has been at war with basically every other one in some configuration over time. But interestingly, and to give you a sense of scale, here's how big Oregon is compared to all these countries, right? So imagine if in the 90s, the independent nation of Salem was trying to commit war crimes against Ashland, right? Those are the scales that we're talking about here when we're talking about the Balkans. It's all remarkably compressed in together. All of that as well puts it right in the kind of region, the kind of country that something like American Music Abroad is looking for. This is a place that American musicians and Americans generally aren't traveling to very much at all. So there's this opportunity there to go and present American culture somewhere that it wouldn't be existing otherwise. That brings us to part 3. Again, you can say it with me. You? Me? Fortunately, not just me. 2 of my bandmates that went on this trip with me are here with me right now. We're going to bring them up here, and it's not going to be awkward at all. Here is Crystal Larisa and Joe Sussman.
Oh, that's a bright thing.
I know, I had to put you awkwardly over there because of the projector.
What's up with that?
So the 3 of us play in a band called Never Come Down. And very briefly, we've been applying for this program for the last several years. It's kind of one of the things that us and all of our friends, it seems like, all our musician friends are doing. Last year, we finally got asked to audition. We got flown to Las Vegas for like 5 hours. We had a 20-minute audition in which we had to perform our music and perform some music they'd chosen for us, and also try to get 5 people on a panel from the State Department to sing in harmony with us. And we won, obviously. We got a spot. We were 1 of 10 bands chosen to go out this year. We were there in late January, early February. And what I want to do now is talk about that more informally. And this is, we're going to kind of blur from facilitated conversation up here with whatever questions y'all have. So fire away as we're going here. I have some stuff I'm going to throw at you and myself. Starting very, very broadly, what's it like over there? And what did we do? What's going on? What happens?
Whew, we don't have that, like, I'm
That
already
sounds
sweating
bad.
about the time, but,
I'm sorry.
no, it's cool. What was it like over there? I wish we had up the slide of, like, all the countries again.
I
Can
can
you
do
pull it
that.
up real quick? Like, one thing that will, like, always stay with me is when we were here up in Bosnia, in Herzegovina, but Bosnia is, like, what they call it, and we were in Sarajevo, and that was our last stop, right, on the tour, which I kind of felt like saved best for last in the sense of what a beautiful city that was. But the thing that, like, people are always, like, concerned about safety in other places, right, which I think is, like, kind of ironic and hilarious coming back home after something like that. I was like, and all the shows going on with, like, the new regime or whatever you call it, the new people, and it was just like I never felt unsafe to go home, but I actually, like, felt kind of unsafe. But when I was in Bosnia, our last place, I remember that was the one part, we're partners, we're in the band, you know, together, we spent a lot of time together. Thankfully we had our own rooms the entire friggin' tour, which was awesome to, like, have some apart time, because we need that. And but I found myself in Sarajevo one night, like, walking the street at night, and it felt pretty safe. But there was one time where I, like, got into this alleyway and, like, these huge, massive, tall buildings, everything feels like so, like, a lot of cement, you know, and I remember being pretty alone at one point and, like, having this, like, looming feeling of, like, oh my God, I'm, like, in a totally foreign country, female, like, by myself, like, this is intense, and, like, oh my God, like, what, and the little weird voice in the head just starts, like, spinning off, like, negativity, and then all of a sudden I was just like, I looked down the street and there was a little 7-year-old boy, the backpack on, like, skipping and singing, like, down this dark alleyway, like, hey! And I was like, stop being a bitch. Okay, and then I like, but honestly, like, I felt like all my answers about, like, all my feelings about safety, especially on this trip, and this wasn't, like, when we were with the people who were driving us, the places, like, but for the most part, I felt extremely safe in all these places, and especially, like, Sarajevo and Slovenia, which is also, like, Slovenia had a lot more money than some of the other places we were in, so of course it's gonna feel a little bit safer. But that was just something I really took away, was, like, I felt incredibly safe in these places.
Yes. Can we talk about what our actual day-to-day was like over there? The big thing that we're sent over there to do is perform and play music, as depicted right here. That happened all over the place. Go for it.
This isn't a bomb shelter. in
No.
Kosovo. Yeah.
That's
This
not
is a
Kosovo.
former, or is that
That's in the like more rural outside.
This was in Slovenia.
in Slovenia?
But there's a
not
stage
bomb
that looks
shelter.
very, very similar.
That was
Yes.
a bomb shelter.
It was a
Anyway.
converted bomb shelter.
In saying that, I feel like the experience of landing, you said what was it like to get there, to
Yeah,
land there? We left the country and there was a gauntlet with 2 bomb dogs and armed officers at PDX as we were leaving on inauguration day. And so as everybody left the country, whether you're going abroad or you're going to Salem, you were put into a line, put 2 by 2, and sent through a gauntlet. And there were 2 dogs and 2 officers. And at the time, I didn't think much of it at all. I was like, oh yeah, they're just dogs. Oh, they're bomb dogs. I smell like weed. I don't care. Whatever. It's fine, Morgan. Whatever. So I'm just like traveling. And these dogs are very aggressive. As you walk 2 by 2, the dog will come up to your butt, to the next person's butt, to their bag and your bag, and then boom, boom on the side. Everything's very beautiful. Really good relationship between the handler and the dog, which I was interested in. I was like, God, that's so beautiful. Look how good they communicate. And we leave our country, and we go through what has been a war-torn country where there's still bullet holes in the places where we played. And there are still graves in the streets where we played. And there's a very, very near-sighted reminder of what happened there, right? And none of those airports and none of those transitions between the country felt as intimidating or terrifying as it did to go and leave our country. So for me, I didn't think about that in terms of safety, like you were saying, safety at night. Yeah, I felt safe everywhere over there. Well, it's all been destroyed already. Everyone's looking at each other like, okay, what are we gonna do now, right? And I felt like the amount of fear that I left with, I didn't even think about it. And you said when we came back home, I've never had more fear and more anxiety about returning home. And then I thought again about those dogs as I was leaving our country. And I was like, we're going back home to the most militarily aggressive place on earth. And we've been checked out on the way out, and we're gonna get checked in on the way in. And that didn't feel good.
But just
Didn't feel good.
because we didn't talk about the day to day yet.
No, yeah.
I
let's
just love.
We can do whatever we want.
I would love to jump into
Kosovo?
Yes. Well, we started in Kosovo,
Yeah.
and I just want to say, as a touring band who has done logistically everything for ourselves, now we have a manager and we have an agent. We got a little bit of team the last couple years, but this was the bougie tour. This was getting to stay every night with 5 rooms. There's 5 of us in the van, and we're a couple, so we can always room together. But having 5 bedrooms and hot, amazing breakfast every day at all of the hotels were business class. We were not in any kind of poverty, desolate. We didn't. And I've heard from other friends who have done these tours. They've stayed with host families or they've done different stuff. I felt because it was logistically the biggest tour they've ever done on a small scale. We were getting some I don't know. It just felt taken care of, and also logistically every day we had an itinerary. We would go to the embassies in the beginning of each country.
I have the itinerary here somewhere.
You have it? Okay. And we would go over the set itinerary at the embassy, which you had to have high clearance to go into some of the places. And this is this is the
There's a
day.
day,
Yeah, this is a day, what it looks like.
So about a month before we left, we all were emailed a 100-page document that included everything from where we'd be eating lunch 6 weeks into the future to every travel advisory for every country that we were shipped to, every contact in every place. Very, very governmental, very organized, and in a way that for our experience, I did feel very taken care of and very supported through that whole process, but in a way that also felt U.S. governmental and intimidating.
Yeah, and also, just side note, I also completely, because of timing and being a band and being busy and stuff, things just happen. You're in the next month and you're just oh shit, we're in that month, we're going on tour a few weeks or whatever. We had some time to think about it. We didn't know until a few months prior what countries. We knew we got in, but it was this slow process. And I forgot that we had a new president. I didn't forget that, but I forgot the timing of when that goes into effect. And literally when we took off the day of inauguration and we're watching everything across all these airport TVs and news and it was wild. But that was a big part of it, and I like didn't realize that until we were really on the trip, and I'm like, oh shit, things are gonna change where things have already begun to change.
Yes. Perfect segue into, oh, yeah, Jason.
You're talking about all this stuff as being like incredibly organized and all that.
Yeah.
Did it ever feel like that was like being leveraged towards you to like oh, we control everything that's going on and like you felt like you had to kind of be
Like ride the party line in some way.
ride the party line and kind of do that stuff, or did they like
No.
I mean, did they say don't sing about this, or don't do?
That was one of my biggest questions
Yeah.
through this entire
Because
process.
it seems like everything else is really regimented and like really,
Yeah, and that, like, what you're asking about is like getting at one of the core kind of contradictions of this whole program, and that's why I presented it in the very like mixed bag way that I did earlier, which is that, to answer your question directly, no.
Right.
We had complete freedom to say anything other than my opinion represents that of the United States government.
Yeah.
That was one sentence we were told not to say.
They advised if you got a political question and you felt like answering it to always, always, always mention that I am a private U.S. citizen and these are my opinions. But they were like especially filmed or like.
But there was no censorship.
No. Censorship. Still though, like why I have this question up here and why I wanted to talk about you guys too is that I do feel these two strands pulling on me. There's one end in which I am here at the whim of the United States federal government. I'm here because the U.S. government believes that it serves their ends for me to be here. And I have deep skepticism about those ends and what they're up to.
Yeah.
And as individuals, we were humanizing our country and receiving the humanization of other countries in a way that felt not at all political or diplomatic or serving any function other than a human-to-human function. So I'm just really curious, like how this question strikes you. Like, did we? Were we supposed to? I don't know.
I think it's really tricky question, right? Because well, first place we flew into was Kosovo, and I think Kosovo is a hot place right now for the UN. I think it's a place that we want to occupy, and I believe that, because why else would you be anywhere if you're in the United States? It's what we do. We're good at occupying. We're good at resources. We like stuff, and we want to keep this thing going. So we need positions to do that. So obviously, for me, there's a part of me that's like, oh, we're just like the real nice bow on the new military base that's going to be in Kosovo. We're just a nice cultural easement, right, to make these things feel better. That's part of me thinks that. The other part of me is like, the whole schedule wasn't written by the government. The volunteers that do all this work aren't working for the government. The people that are working face to face with the schools and the American Corner, which is a thing we could talk about, they are not, they don't have an agenda that's saying to them like we need to convert people. There's a genuine opportunity, cultural opportunity for exposure, musically, literarily, culturally. Our culture goes just like food. It goes through boundaries. It goes past borders, and so in that way, I feel like somebody still understands that we're human in the government, and they need to be. We need as a people, and we need as a culture to be connecting with each other face to face, because whatever we're getting via the media or whatever isn't a real thing, and so that part of it, the reality of like we are humans and we need to connect, and that's more important than any of the other bull that's going on, was like still like the thread of dignity that music rests on, and that this for me that this whole project rested on to some degree, because I could think like, all right, so we're next thing you know we're going to talk about they're out, whatever, you could go down whatever dark hole you want about occupying the Balkans, but there was a real sense that even in Kosovo, because of what we did there during the war recently, that they love Americans more than we love ourselves. There's children named Bill Clinton,
Should we just skip ahead to the Kosovo section?
Should we?
Yeah, sure.
All right.
This is
I do
Kosovo.
want to say something about that just
Go
in
ahead.
general
Yeah, please.
too. Like again, remembering the new what do you call them again? Like the presidency. Like don't. Thank you.
Administration.
My brain. The administration. Like again, how do you feel about representing the United States? And I was the one to write I was the person, not to toot my own horn, but like we had applied for this, our other bandmate applied for it many times, and then I applied for this last year, and we got the call, we got the like audition, which I'm like, yay, but at that time, there was a different administration, and I felt differently about stuff, and then again, now we're on this trip, and holy shit, we have a new person, and oh wow, now we're representing that, and I was like, interesting. Ooh, I feel different about that. Also, like, I do a lot of social media up until now for our band, and like, they wanted us to like and tag like all the US embassies and all this stuff. Well, I'm following them for like months before, and then everything's like changing, and I'm like, whoa, you know, like we're still send your pictures, and they're sending pictures of us and all that stuff. So that felt really weird. That felt really weird and kind of uncomfortable, especially as we're gonna go on this talk and things change. But I felt like Joe, extremely good and important, the face-to-face value of just like being with real people, seeing us. We're all very different people. Like we joke sometimes in our band, if music hadn't connected us, like we might not be best friends, you know? So, yeah.
Totally. So the next question I was going to throw out was, how do they feel about us over there? Depends on where you are.
We started in like the most American-friendly, I'd say.
One thing I do got to say that's generally true about the Balkans, because on my next slide, they know way more about us than we do about them, which might feel obvious. That extends to like we're there playing like bluegrass, Americana, folksy music. At every single show we were at, people showed up in cowboy hats, just ready to go. Like, yes, there's a banjo on stage, cowboy hat. Check. But yeah, then Kosovo, right, which you mentioned, and which here is a slide.
Oh yeah, here we go.
Oh, there it is. Okay, so Kosovo.
We learned.
We learned something. That whole analogy I made earlier about Salem and Ashland, right? That was referring to Serbia and Kosovo and Albania. Serbia attempted a genocide of the Albanian people in the 90s, and Kosovo, which is largely Albanian ethnicity, and Albania both credit the United States for saving their people. You talk to anyone on the street, that is more or less the answer they'll give you. Every American that we talked to there had a story about being bought coffee, or being given a free taxi ride, or some kind of incredible display of generosity from someone in Kosovo or Albania because of this way that people in those two countries view the United States, to the point that, as Joe mentioned a moment ago, there are many kids with the first name Bill Clinton or Hillary Clinton. There's a statue of Bill Clinton in the central square of Pristina, the capital of Kosovo. And even more so, there's pop music like this that everyone in Kosovo and Albania knows.
This is
I'm so excited for this.
Thank you, USA. You are my best friend.
Oh my God.
You are the peacekeeper. You are the legend. Thank you, USA. You are my best friend. You are the peacekeeper. You are the legend.
I get some context.
Yeah.
So we were introduced to this video by two women who were that ran an animation festival in a little tiny town up in the mountains in Kosovo, and it was like literally going to Hawthorne and like finding the two most like goth sort of queer gals that are like doing an art project, right, or something, and you're having coffee with them. They're like, oh, we have to show you our favorite song. Like everybody in Kosovo knows this. So you can imagine like getting this piece of video from these two like hipster, like really artistic, beautiful women. And it was so bizarre. And they're like kind of giggling like, yeah, everybody knows it, and they're kind of like shuddering, like it's it's kind of our favorite thing, and that aspect of this like change. I mean, it hugely changes my perspective on just the production of the video of that one, but where it came from and who it touched and why it's important. And
also, interesting fact about Kosovo was 65% of the population is under 35.
Under 35.
So it's a very young nation. Like there's a lot of young people, and it feels like you feel that energy in the street. Like and you see a shit ton of 20-something-year-olds, and you're like, whoa. And then you'll see like an old lady walking across the street. You're like, wow.
Yeah. That's also a moment in which, for me, as someone who's like, all of my tendencies go towards criticizing U.S. government, especially our foreign policy, and then to then have people saying like, no, you saved us, your country saved us, forced me to reconsider that and find a gray area in a way that I was not expecting to.
I've always supported what we. I actually thought we should have done a lot more.
Yeah.
Both that and like the Bosnian War.
Yeah.
Like I'm sad that it took us so long to actually intervene, but like we saved so many lives and. Yeah, I mean, they were basically genocides, and all of Europe had said never again, and then it was like, oh shit, we let it happen again, and then.
we're only 100 years out, sugar. Right here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like 100 years, we did it here. 150 years ago, we're occupying. Just in case you didn't know.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. That's sorry.
Also, just real quick about, and I don't know if we're gonna get into this,
Talk
but
about-
like when we were talking about Peja, like going to the town of Peja, which was a mountainous, like more rural, but still like a town in the middle of it, beautiful with the artistic gals and stuff. There was a school there that the U.S. funded, and was it out of an old? What was the building, Kaden?
It was a school. It was a school, and then it became an after-school.
Okay, and then it
education
became an after-school amazing program for young kids, like poverty line perhaps, or just underprivileged, whatever that means for them. And it was to like robotics classes for these like young children. And we went into this like amazing space, which was such a cool use of like an old space, and they flipped it and they did all this stuff. And I'm walking in there, and we had our tour manager, who was a really cool musician gal herself who had done the program. And her and I were like buddies, she's another gal on the tour. And we were looking through it, and she's from Mississippi originally. And we were both talking, and as we were looking through and like seeing all the money, and I think they had told us like, they were very open with us in Kosovo about the spending, which I thought was like shocking, because I'm like, this is like, you're just telling us, but these people again are like so grateful. The specific person that we had showing us around was just a very pro-American dude, and he's just telling us, I mean, we got to tour the entire embassy, which we did not get to do in every country, but I felt like we got a very big in because they're so pro-America. And they were showing us what they did this school. I want to say it was like a $200,000 project, which in the grand scheme of money is not that much. But what they were made like to do was incredible. But me and my girlfriend Tania were talking, and I'm like, what's kind of wild to me is like, why the hell aren't we doing this in the U.S.? Like, I am not against like foreign giving and all that. I think it's fabulous. But like, how come we can figure out how to do it here? And like you were saying, like what in a terrible like dark way, like there's no free lunch. So like, it was interesting, and it was kind of like murky, like parts of it I felt very like it felt so amazing to see these kids, but at the same time I'm like,
I think it kind of felt like, not like Louis Armstrong, but we felt like, hey, there's this program for after school kids that was like, I mean, it was nicer than the college I went to, like really, they had really good equipment. And you know, there's the comment that was made while we were in the building was like, you know, they still got dirty water in Flint, Michigan. You know, like we can't get our water right, but we're still doing this. And so, you know, it's maybe apples and oranges, but the idea that you come home and it's like the amount of investment we put into ourselves and our own communities that are poor is not at all. You know, and if it's not based on opportunity or gentrification, it doesn't seem like it happens at all.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
No, you first.
Yeah. You mentioned that the State Department wanted you all to like share to, you know, social medias and stuff like that. So I guess kind of multi-part question of like, did you all end up doing that? And then did you end up with like any blowback from any of like your community or your fans? And then also like, how did you feel about doing that if you did that?
So I did it basically up until the shit really started hitting the fan, which happened while we were on tour, which I think Kaden will probably get to a little bit, I don't know.
We try.
Whatever, but like, you know, like State Department funding all being frozen, all that stuff literally happened while we were like on the end of this tour. And it started off, and each country we got to felt murkier, and thankfully, there were a lot of really cool female workers who I felt like were very open with us about what the fuck was going on while we were in the countries. Because we were like a certain point, like, are we gonna get sent home? Are we gonna get paid? Like, there's a lot of time off, you know, all this stuff. So to answer your question, I felt as a social media person like totally fine because nothing also in the State Department or any of the connective, what are they called? The embassies. None of the embassies had like shown any of this like, for lack of better terms, like Trump propaganda stuff or whatever, like none of them had displayed any of that. So at the time it was like really cool to still be like paired with them and they're spreading some of our stuff and they're also, they were a lot of times tagging us, but we would share it or whatever. So I felt fine about that. But then things started to change. And so by the end of the tour, I wasn't doing those things because I personally like didn't feel comfortable like just being a part of the new administration. And honestly, there was no pushback about that. Like nobody, and I mean, there's so much, I don't want to skip too far ahead, but like by the end of the tour, things were very apparent what was going on. And we felt like AMA, the program, this, what do you say again, the embassies themselves, especially the American workers and the people of that country who were working, you know, each individual country had workers that were not American working for the embassy. I feel like they wanted the story of like what really is going on to be heard, and they were kind of like, screw censorship, like say whatever you guys want, you know?
The people who would have ostensibly been monitoring anything we were doing or any of our speech there were as in the woods as we were, if not more. The handlers that we had from each embassy, is like the attaché of cultural affairs within each country, many of them told us on the day they were picking us up at the border, hi, I spent all morning sending emails, making sure I have funding for you to be here, and might lose my job next week. So all of them were thrown into in many ways, deeper chaos than we were, and were, among anything else, like, one, on our team about all of it. It became clear that we all were having similar feelings. No one in any of these embassies felt, had anything positive to say about what was going on politically back here. And also felt like they desperately needed something to hold on to. And in this case, we gave them some distraction and some connection to fellow human beings by playing music and giving them a project to work on, which is not at all what any of us anticipated.
No.
But we did see firsthand how the State Department started falling out on itself and how ambiguity and confusion were just running rife through the entire department.
You kind of touched on
You
what
had
I
a
was,
real quick question back there.
Oh, I'm sorry.
you kind of touched on what I was
Okay.
going to ask.
Cool. And did you?
I was curious about how this was framed for the actual concert goers. Like, who were the people? Were they random people who could just buy tickets, or were they kind of chosen in some way? And was it like, this is just a band, or is it like these are the American ambassadors? Or?
It was definitely framed as like, here's a band from America. That was like very prominently displayed everywhere. Were tickets sold?
No,
Well,
for
free.
shows? They were all free.
shows.
Yeah.
They were all free, yeah. And the North Macedonia president thing was like,
Yes.
that was like cause celebrating the American corner was a big
Yeah.
part of the region.
Sure. American corners are little places that are set up usually in public buildings like libraries or parks where there are free English classes, there's free internet, there's all kinds of books and access and information largely around American culture and learning English that the US government through USAID has set up in most countries around the world. One of the events that Crystal was talking about was us there celebrating the 20th anniversary of the American Corner in North Macedonia, in Skopje. Which the president of North Macedonia attended and gave a short speech before we played our bluegrass songs.
Wow.
And has weirdly been to Moscow, Idaho, where
Yeah.
one of our songs is from. We were like, how in the hell? Yeah.
So we were playing music. We're gonna play a little bit of music, kind of what became like the I don't know, the song we rallied around. We're gonna play Weeds.
Oh, cool.
Are you game for that?
Oh, sure, yeah.
On this whole tour. As Joe's getting the guitar out, are there any other like lingering questions or thoughts or
Oh man, there's like
stuff
so
you want me
many
to tell
things
the
we didn't
people of the Balkans
Yeah,
next time?
yeah,
Yes.
Kaden, on the Google map,
Yeah.
why is Kosovo like? I don't know if it's on your map, but like, if I pull up Kosovo on Google Map, the part on the north that touches Serbia
Mhm.
is like dotted.
Yes, that border is contested.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So these are the countries we were talking about earlier about the genocide that the U.S. saved the Albanian ethnicity from was Serbia attacking Kosovo and Albania down here, which we did not go to. So this border is still kind of questionable, or at least according to Google Maps, it's questionable.
It's not recognized.
Yeah, so they've gone to Kosovo, and it's on their passports. If they try to go to Serbia, they won't let them in.
Wow.
Just FYI. So you need to get a new passport
Really
if you're gonna try to go to Serbia.
We got
Right,
the
we can
dullest
scrape those right
stickers
out.
from
Yeah.
like a few of these countries.
Okay, nice.
So maybe they won't see it.
Just as you're tuning, just to like squish in as much of experience as we can too. I just want to say like one of my favorite, most memorable parts was also being in where did we just go? Bosnia, and being what was the first city we stayed in just that one night?
Sorry.
Banja Luka.
Banja Luka, and we're in Banja Luka and it was one night, and we're literally like shit has hit the fan. The really cool female workers there were like the Bosnian women who are working for the embassy. We're like, my ADD's going crazy right now. They were like, sorry, chain smoking at dinner.
Hey, we smoked everywhere.
It was
It's
we
awesome.
smoked everywhere. We smoked cigarettes everywhere, and that was great. And the coffee and cigarettes were awesome. But they were chain smoking because everybody's gonna probably lose their job and shit is like going really bad. And talking to women who were probably in their late 40s, mid 50s about being in war 30 years ago when I was a baby, right? And them surviving and getting through, but everybody losing somebody or everybody's brother like fighting like in the street. And talking to them while watching all the news about our country and all the crazy shit that hadn't even really started hitting the fan. It was just such a surreal, like, and I'm so grateful for it because honestly those women were badass and it made me feel like they can live through shit, like we can live through shit, and also like this might be a really long road ahead of us, you know? So really grateful for that moment and being open and for their transparency of like what was going on. Anyway, that's cool.
This was the song that helped me remember that I was not representing only a country whose actions I didn't approve of, but also they're saying something I believe.
Yeah. All the kids are awesome. It's music still works, in case you wondered. It's like the best thing, and it worked like for to be able to share our music for not only the kids but the embassy workers who were cleaning their offices out. You know, at the end of our trip, it was like there was no better place to be. It was like we needed to be there, and we needed them. It all was like. It was so cool, and for me as a musician, you know, who's chosen to do this as our thing, that reinforcement of the power of music, the power of things that aren't bought and sold, the power of things that are just connected are truly powerful, and they really, really count, and that we can't lose sight of, you know, everything's got to make a penny, or everything's got to make up some sort of value. The value's invented, and we don't need it. This is what this song is about. This is called Down in the Weeds. And here we go. How did we get down so down in the weeds? Always want more, so much more than we need. Temperatures rising, so is the sea. How did we get down so down in the weeds? Crossing this country, you can see what we've done. Nobody lived here, just a new place to run. Freedom to speak, you can talk to my gun. Greener pastures awaiting, there's work to be done. hill, fishing rivers. Cut down the tree, build a track to deliver the coal of our country, the souls of our men. Until there's none left for sale, no one can win. How did we get down, so down in the weeds? We always want more, so much more than we need. The temperature's rising, so is the sea. How did we get down, so down in the weeds? The temperature's rising, so is the sea. How did we get down, so down in the weeds?
Thank you, Joe and Crystal, for doing the thing, coming up here with me. Thank you all for coming to living lectures and staying very late. This was great. Get up on the email list. We'll do it again soon, I hope. And I love you all. Yay.